That's
You want, how much?
I think the assembled came with donations.
No, it wasn't before.
Then it's $40 extra for the foundation. Check my sheet. Now you got me wondering.
I just heard you say it didn't come with
The
them.
unassembled doesn't come with foundation. We'll be having a class on that later in the year too. So if you wanted to. You know, it's awkward to always be in the front. I feel like everyone's staring at me.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, that's probably I wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
I thought I had placed order, so I wasn't thinking about
Sorry.
that stuff.
That's okay, yeah.
Yes, and we have your phone numbers on there, just text.
Write it down.
You're welcome. Oh, you need to scoot towards, you can go all the way in front if you need to, in the light.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Don't start until. I'll slow this down.
I think pretty much everybody's here.
Hold on, if you're not. Oh.
I started the broadcast about a minute ago. No big deal. A little bit dead air never hurt anybody. It's not like we're professional broadcasters or anything.
And I need to watch chat.
Yeah, because Doug might ask some questions, and I know Doug was planning on watching. So for those that don't know, I'm Dan. I see a lot of new faces today, so I'll have everybody introduce themselves. For those that don't know, though, we also have a YouTube channel we started so that people who aren't able to get to the meetings can still actually watch. There's a chat function on the YouTube video channels if you set them up. So you can actually chat if you can't make it here, and my wife will be monitoring it, or Mary will be monitoring it, or somebody will be monitoring it, so that you can still interact. So if you have questions, because sometimes we'll have different speakers, it's not always me. Today's more of a business meeting than actually any major presentations or anything. But I just wanted to get that covered. Like I said, I see a lot of new faces. People care to introduce themselves?
My name is Jennifer Durston. We are, I guess, beginning our second year of beekeeping.
Okay.
But obviously need to learn a lot.
You know,
That's why we're here.
beekeeping, if you ever think you actually know everything about it, you know nothing about it, because it changes so rapidly. Little things will get figured out. It wasn't until just recently that we figured out that the varroa mites don't actually drink the hemoglobin of the bee, they actually consume the fat. Now, that seems silly and trivial, but that's going to completely change how you treat for varroa mites. So, you know, you say you got a lot to learn, but everybody's got a lot to learn. You know, I've been doing this for several years, and we've got, you know, quite a few hives now. I don't know nothing. Nobody ever does.
Yeah.
Anyway, next person.
James Johnson. Same hives and sort of.
I understand.
Susan Toronto. I've been doing it for 5 years. Took a break last year when the bees died. So we're starting all over. And always learning. You're so right.
Yeah,
So,
always learning. I want to make you reintroduce yourself, Bill.
Yeah, I'm Bill Eubanks. This is started my 3rd year of beekeeping.
Bruce Nielsen, 2nd year.
Very cool.
John Moss, 1st year. Steve, 0 years.
Just started.
Jason, beginner.
Me?
Yeah, well,
Well.
skip her.
You skipped me.
I didn't try
don't
to, you just didn't
count.
say anything.
I'm Valerie Reinhardt. I'm the horticulture manager here at Farm Park, and I've been doing the bees, taking care of the bees here for 20 years until recently when he took over.
I'm Melinda Zickersh. I am his wife. And we have lots of hives for Midgard Farms.
Kim Hope, zero experience like you.
Just starting out.
Just come to see if I can gain some knowledge, see if I really want to do this.
No. Nothing wrong with that.
Learn something.
My name is Tim Boggs. I'm here with my daughter Sarah. And I haven't started beekeeping yet, but I've always had an fascinated with it. And I'm like,
Very cool.
Guess I'm Michael Hogan.
But you have to look.
I'm going in my second year. The last one day, the 2 hives were actually out flying, and so looking good.
Terry Trub, second year. I lost my hive this winter.
Don't feel bad. I've gotten lots and lots of calls from people who've lost hives. Nobody ever wants to hear it, but beekeeping is mostly about mite management now. And I almost guarantee you it was the mites. Nobody wants to hear that, but you know, if you,
Well, we took it apart and
yeah,
Did 'em like,
if you take
Yeah.
on the high side.
well,
we
you,
had a lot of
once
mites.
they're dead, you really can't get a good hive count. Now you're looking for, you know, waste and the way it's chewed
Yeah,
up.
and plus it's probably more bees than 100 bees in a half cup because they're all dead bees, so.
Right.
But it wasn't 9 mites.
But if you got lots of pictures, we can do an autopsy that way.
I cried. No, I didn't take pictures. I cried and called him. My bees are dead.
Terrible. Don't cry.
Bill Serby, I've got 2 hives in my second year, and yeah, they were flying today. So
Yeah.
It was rainy though.
Andy Borkowski, we're new. We don't have any hives yet.
Ben Kelly, same.
Ditto.
Ben Panel also.
Dave Patterson, year 28.
Fair enough.
Mark Hammond, my first year with this club here, but I also belong to Geauga County and Ohio State Beekeepers.
Susan Dunlap, my pet bees, I think this will be my 5th year.
Very cool.
James West, this is my first year as a beekeeper.
So as you see, we've got lots and lots of new people, so don't be shy. There's lots and lots of, you know, people that are going to make silly mistakes, and lots of people who are going to figure out brilliant things that even I don't necessarily know.
We have 4 viewers online, but
Ooh.
none of them want to introduce themselves.
Now that's funny. Should have screen names, right? That's funny. But yeah, the you know, I think the first 3 years of beekeeping, I killed all my beehives. So I just want that to be, you know, upfront with everybody, because I know a lot of people, when they lose their hives the first time, they're like, "It's my fault." I mean, honestly, it is. But it's easier to kill them to keep them alive, and there is a learning curve. And a lot of people are very hard on themselves, and the hardest part is going, "Damn it, I need to buy bees again," and trying again. You know, if you just give up easily, this is going to be a really awful hobby for you. Because it's really, really frustrating sometimes when you've read all the right literature, you talk to all the right people, and they just don't do what they're supposed to do. They're not pulling their end. So if you do have something strange you run into, you know, don't be afraid. Make friends and have people talk to each other. Because sometimes you can just go over to somebody else's yard and look through their bees with them, and that'll show you an awful lot when you go back through your own and you go, "Oh, mine doesn't look like that." What did I do wrong? So a lot to be gained that way.
Well, it's not necessary to burn your hive with varroa mites.
No, please don't burn your hives for varroa mites. I mean, I would love to sell you more hives, but not that way.
Foul brood, yes. Roll mites, no.
Yeah, American foul brood is really the only reason you should burn your hive. And I'm not going to tell you it's, you know, it doesn't happen around our area, because it certainly does. I'll be honest, I've only seen it a couple of times, and it was because I was looking for it. You know, it's not as big of a problem as it used to be. That said, you know, knock on wood, hopefully it stays that way. You still have to pay attention. If you see some, you know, it's a tragedy. Oh, let's see. Moving on. I'm terrible at this part of it, just for the record. Much better beekeeper than public speaker. Can we get a secretary's report? Is he here today? Oh. How about a treasurer's report?
Treasurer here?
Yeah, I knew he was here.
And I didn't bring enough copies out. Around. This is the current report of finances.
Membership, she's home again.
What?
She's home.
He's home.
Home.
Oh, tell me. What am I?
Treasurer.
Yeah, this has got to go to him. I agree.
So you'll have to bring that up.
Yeah.
What's the cost of membership?
I believe it was $20. Cost of membership was $20, right? Is that what we settled on?
Mm-hmm.
Mine's a lot more expensive because I pay for a professional membership.
And we will handle that next week. Okay. And if everybody could sign in. As of the end of last year, we had 24 paid members. Not bad.
Yeah, you have more to say?
Hmm?
Do you have, you can talk about that? Stand in front of the whiteboard. About your treasury report.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stand in front of the camera. Over here to the light.
Okay. We have a treasurer's report. There were 24 paid members as of the end of the year. And we had a balance of $565.78. Very good first year.
And membership fees were $20 for family?
Membership fees are $20. And if you'd like to get a shirt, it's $15, and name tags are $5.
And I don't know if you want to take money for.
No, let's do that next week. I don't bring any forms right now.
Oh, that's fair.
Okay.
Well, that makes. What's that?
$20 a year, yeah.
$20 a year.
$20 a year.
And if you're new, put an email address down, so, you know. That'd be really helpful.
So we'll give everybody a second to read through the report. Anybody want to move to accept the treasurer's report?
I move to accept the treasurer's.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Move it along. Right. All right. Let's see. Next we have old business. Does anybody have anything old they wanted to talk about? Yeah, I didn't have any old business either. New business, we need to make a budget for the 2018 year for that season. So we're not exactly a rich club yet, if we'll ever be rich. But we need to decide what we're going to try to fund and what we're going to try to build up. So if people want to think about that, pay attention to the Facebook page. I'm going to try to put together a meeting and we can all meet somewhere and discuss a budget. And then we'll propose a budget for the next meeting in March. And I will probably have our lovely treasurer, because he's here all the time, run that meeting because I will be in Florida and I don't think my vice president will be back yet. So I'm throwing you to the wolves.
So it's gonna be in Florida?
Well, I will be on YouTube if you set it up, but I will not be up here. I've got to go down and make splits for all of our stuff, so I'll be down with my partner, splitting beehives and goofing off in Disney. Gotta be honest.
When do you think they'll be moving north?
They should be here at the very beginning of April. That's what we're aiming for.
Okay.
So, so one thing for the new members that they may or may not know, and this has been a standing thing that we've been doing. So the farm parks is nice enough to let me keep my bees here on the farm parks, so that everybody can see what a big operation for beekeeping looks like. We're also going to be doing some queen rearing here next year. That my wife is leading that project. But that said, before the meetings come April, once the bees are back anyway, before the meetings, about 6 o'clock, we'll go back and we'll go through the hives, provided that you've gone through the volunteer program for the farm parks, so that you're a volunteer and that you have a full ventilated suit. I have a few ventilated suits I can loan out if you don't have one, but the reason for the full ventilated suit is because it is mad overkill.
I believe that if you have at least a veil, you can stand at a distance and listen in.
Right.
But you can't be hands-on unless you have a full ventilated suit.
Right. But the reason for the full ventilated suit is that no matter how bad it gets, I know in that suit you're not really being stung, even if you're freaking out. I've had some new guys that were brand new to beekeeping that when the bees walked on them, they wigged out. And when you've got a group of people that you're trying to teach, that two things happen. Now you have upset the bees. Now we have a real problem. Or I have to stop the entire class. I can't teach anything to be able to make sure that that person really isn't being stung to death. So with a full ventilated suit, the reason I demand those is A, I know you're not being stung, and you're not going to freak out the class that way. But we'll let people go through our hives. So if you don't have a hive and you don't have the ability to have a hive yet anywhere, you can run one of mine. I'll assign you a specific hive. Before the meetings, we'll go through it, but we'll probably set aside a Saturday once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks to go through them so that you can get hands-on experience going through the hives. I don't think there's any other beekeeping association in the state that's actually doing that. But because we're in a unique position here and we can, I thought we probably should.
So just the jacket's not good enough, or?
No, because realistically, if somebody starts to panic, like, I guess I would accept a jacket if you were an experienced beekeeper, but I don't necessarily want a jacket just because I really do want the assurance that if anything does go wrong, that person's really not going to be stung. So you would be able to watch, but I wouldn't necessarily have you handle frames and whatnot.
I don't need to handle it.
They fly up your sleeves and up your pant legs and who knows where else.
Right.
The reason to be a volunteer with the Metro Parks is because you're doing things on the park property that actually helps cover you
And what exactly
legally.
What does one have to go through to get to the volunteer?
You fill out a form and you go to one of their orientations. They usually have 2 a month, the first Thursday, I think, of the month and maybe the last. And
So
they're
you
at
get that information online then? Or?
yeah, you should.
You can find all that Farm Parks website.
It's at the Lake Metro Parks website. It's about an hour course. It's orientation. It's just basically making sure we don't have any strange people wandering the parks.
Check that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it gets you in the system too. So.
You know, and that sets you up so you can volunteer at other things too.
My trouble is I'm often busy on a Monday, so like,
yeah,
sure.
Mondays and Thursdays are
sure.
I got 2 bee clubs that Monday and Thursday. That's when they meet.
You very well might benefit from coming on Saturday.
At present, we have the regular setup for the orientation that they do at 6 o'clock at Lakefront Lodge. If for some reason I've got a group of people who can't make that, they said that they would probably come ahead of one of our beekeeping meetings and do the orientation.
Yeah, we probably set up
the reason I'm here tonight is because it's President's Day and the school is closed, so we don't have music band rehearsals.
I understand.
So I'm here.
Well, like I said, if nothing else,
Serendipitously,
we're gonna keep trying to do the YouTube channel.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's a little silly, but it is useful.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I don't get too stage frighty. Look, I'm actually staying with an agenda for a day. Our treasurer said we should do dues at next meeting, so dues will be due at the next meeting for those that want to formally join the club. So anybody who just wants to attend an audit, I'm not going to make anybody pay. We're not that kind of organization, you know, so if don't feel strong-armed into being a member. It's more of a voting thing if you're going to be a member. Members get to vote. That's the big difference. Let's see. Also in new business, we need to pay the Ohio State Beekeepers to retain our affiliation. So I have this lovely form I printed out, and I'm going to go hand it to the treasurer. But I move that we, or at least I would like somebody to move, that we pay the Ohio State Beekeepers Association to retain our membership. Anybody want to make the motion?
I motion that we pay Beekeepers.
There's a motion. Anybody want to second it? There's a second. All in favor?
Guys.
All in favor, signify with a sign of aye.
Aye.
Thank you, because that's really, it's all about insurance, really.
Yeah.
Ohio State Beekeepers, they do a lot to promote beekeeping through the state. Right now, they're actually, there's an Ohio bill going through that would give you a lot of legal protection, provided that your neighbor decides he doesn't like that you're beekeeping. So that's the kind of thing that Ohio State Beekeepers does, as well as having some of the sponsorship for like Wooster, what is it, Tri-County? They're helping to sponsor that and bring in some of the bigger names in beekeeping. Peggy Garnes, if you were here last month, she was the one who spoke. She's the vice president of the Ohio State Beekeepers. So we're starting to build stronger contacts with Ohio State. Ed Friel, he's not here today, but he's relatively new to beekeeping himself, but he's the Western Reserve representative, and he's out here most meetings. So, like I said, we're starting to get pretty deep roots. Somehow he finagled me into being the vice president of the Trumbull County Beekeepers as well now. So, yeah, I'm trying to be everywhere at once. It's kind of entertaining. All right, new business. Readdressing, one of the things I wanted to know is what do you guys want as far as classes? And I'm going to take notes this time. Well, I got a video. I don't even need to take notes. So we had a meeting at one point with just the more executive officers, and we talked about having, you know, specific classes, but we never really got it fleshed out that well, and we never really brought it to the membership itself. So what I wanted to ask is what you guys want to learn. Because a lot of times I'm the idiot standing up here in front of everybody and saying, do this, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the things you want to know. So does anybody have any specific interests as far as beekeeping?
My biggest interest is propagating your bees and making splits and growing nukes and stuff, so you're not always buying bees from some joker down south every year.
Sure.
So that's my biggest ambition.
So you want 1 month to talk about splits and all that?
That'd be great, yeah.
Okay.
Especially when you're in the season of doing splits, that would be, you know, the time to talk about it, yeah.
Fair enough. Anybody else have any specific classes that they are looking to, you know, learn about? Bueller, anybody?
And while you're doing splits, there's also the queen hole aspect of it.
Queen rearing.
Yeah. So.
And like I said, my wife's going to start a little bit of queen rearing up here, so that'll be something we're doing. Now everybody's all shy.
Are you doing a beginner's class?
We are going to be doing a beginner's class. That is something, there's a couple of different places doing them. I was probably thinking about, I shouldn't say probably thinking about, I was thinking about doing one in April, which is a little late for a beginner's beekeeping class, but as March I'll be in Florida, I can't really do
I
it.
thought we had one scheduled for March 10th.
Did we agree to March 10th? Well, if we're doing one March 10th. Huh.
I thought I saw that on the schedule.
What schedule? Yeah, that's ours.
Oh, okay.
So many things pop up on our calendar at this point. And they're not all my fault, I swear.
And Java does one too.
Yeah, we're going to do that too. That's just going to be a random Saturday. That's not a class. So that is one other thing, is we're gonna assemble hives in April, and we'll be doing that out in Madison. I'll put the details of that on the Facebook group. We've got a little shop set up out there so that we can use brad nailers and all that. So we can show you how to make the frame square and, boxes square and all the rest. Most people can assemble the stuff themselves. It's not that challenging, but it is awful helpful to have the air nailers.
How about something on wax rendering?
Wax rendering?
Oh, that would be.
That's a very good one.
I always have a rough time with it. I try different ways and it never works out very well.
No, fair enough, fair enough. Now that's a very good one.
Mhm.
Because there's a couple of really antiquated, terrifying ways to do it. There's a couple of simpler ways to do it. I won't show you the scary one, but I'll talk about it. If you do it wrong, it explodes. All bad. No, that's a really good one. So many people struggle with that, believe it or not.
How to get clean wax.
At some point, I figured I would show people how to make tincture with propolis, just because that's one that you don't hear about too often. At some point, we'll probably do pollen harvesting, because pollen is one of the things that me and my partner do quite a bit of, pollen being one of the most valuable products of the beehive. And again, you don't run into that many people collecting and harvesting pollen. Anybody else have any specific things they want to know?
Maybe later in the year, overwintering bees?
That's definitely going to happen in the fall. So yeah, that's a good one. There's several different ways of doing it. I will probably, and if you're watching this, John, he's going to end up being the one that teaches that class, because generally speaking, the way I overwinter is I run to Florida. Because the easiest way to face an Ohio winter is not to face an Ohio winter. So my bees are all snowbirds.
How about swarm catching?
We can do swarm catching.
How to get some pollen from these.
That's what I was saying, pollen trapping.
Yeah, part of your.
Oh, I'll speak up. Yeah, pollen trapping is one of the ones. Oh, pollen trapping is definitely one of the ones we'll do. Anybody have anything else? Got lots of months to fill here, folks.
Yeah, speaking of indoor bees, I put a link on Facebook.
I saw
Were you the one that put that one? I was interested in that. So
did everybody look at it? Did the link work?
Yeah.
Oh, the link worked,
fine
yeah.
for me.
I wanted to, I was looking at it at my phone. I want to look at it on a bigger screen, but I'm in the process of wanting to put a new observation hive in the Plant Science Center, and that intrigued me.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So I got plans for an indoor hive, and that's one of the things that we're going to have set up back there for them. So I bought plans recently. That little one, that looked interesting, but I am a little skeptical just for the fact that being small and separated, I'm not sure how they would be able to keep the brood warm. So I think they would have a problem growing.
Yeah.
And it's not cheap.
Yeah, and it was not cheap.
No, it's like $2,000 for a 4 or 5 bang. It's like, that's cool, but not that cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if Doug's watching this or not, but like I said, I bought hive plans for the observation hive. He texted me. Oh, the joys of technology. Any other plans for classes? Any other ideas of things they'd want to learn?
Maybe like medicating your bees in the least invasive way possible.
Okay, so like hive treatment alternatives and whatnot. Absolutely, that's easily done. Because there's several different ways to do beekeeping, and we can touch on treatment-free. We can touch on what they call responsible beekeeping, which is, I guess you'd say, the next softest one from treatment-free. That's where we pretty much lie. I don't really like to use heavy chemicals. I don't think they're generally that useful. But at the same token, you do have to treat them or you will not own bees. That is just the ugly reality of the world we're now living in. If you don't do anything and you go treatment-free, that's a nice way of saying, I'll sell you bees next year. Because, my first 3 years losing the bees every year, it was actually because I was trying to be 100% treatment-free. And varroa mites were just taking me out over winter. If you don't treat before you go into winter, you can kiss them goodbye. Awful as that is. You will occasionally get exceptionally lucky and they'll survive. But when you check them in the spring, they're not building up very quick. You'll find out that you have like a maximum load of mites and all kinds of other weird diseases. All bad.
Another idea, how about, when I first started in beekeeping, I kind of got interested in county fair, but I didn't know what to put my honey in. What kind was it, and was it a light honey, was it dark honey?
Fair enough.
I didn't know how to put a frame in the fair, or.
Fair enough.
Maybe we could talk about that. And
absolutely.
How to maybe win that blue ribbon.
And when we do that same thing, we should do a honey tasting, because a lot of people have never had the different types of varietals.
Well, that'd be cool. Planting for pollinating.
Right, because that's one thing you'll notice, the taste of your honey will differ throughout the year. And even throughout the year, the areas you go to, you'll run into completely different flavors. About the time that goldenrod is coming in, and goldenrod is kind of a butterscotchy caramel corn, caramel candy kind of flavor. And I'm really fond of, that particular honey. But every once in a while, you'll get a frame or two of knotwood, and then I'm upset. Because that stuff's awful. I shouldn't say knotwood, was it knotweed? That is an absolutely awful honey. Like I felt like my partner pranked me.
Yeah.
Took a big old spoonful of that, was all excited, and then I'm like, the other one that was odd that we ran across, and I've never run across it before, and neither had my partner, we ran across chicory honey. Turns out chicory honey is also terrible.
It's very bitter.
It was very bitter. It was very that is not what you think of as honey. Yeah, it's a very weird year to catch that. Let's see. So Doug says extraction of honey. So that's another one we'll show people. For the new folks,
at the Plant Science Center.
right. For the new folks, one thing to keep in mind is that if you come in during daylight hours, Val actually has a extraction set up in the back. So you can extract here and show the school kids that come through how it works. So that's always ideal.
But you have to be a volunteer.
But you have to be a volunteer. Lots of perks with being a
Use my
volunteer.
extractor, but you got to be a volunteer.
So you bring your boxes, just the honey here. You leave the bees, just bring the honey.
Radial extractor you have?
Yeah, It holds 9 half frames, 3 full frames.
And for those that have space restrictions, for members, I went ahead and bought the GP plastic style extractor. That, they're super light, easy to take with you anywhere you go. I have that, an uncapping knife, and a couple of doodads to hold buckets so that you can uncap at home at your leisure. Those are 2 frame extractors. So if you've only got 1 or 2 hives, that's no big deal. If you've got a bunch of hives, that'll end up being a drinking problem. It would take you forever. So something to keep in mind is those things are available to people.
Yeah, the disadvantage of mine is it's a hand crank, not a mechanical. Yeah, I could have bought it with the motorized, but my whole idea is getting the kids involved.
The little plastic one's a tangent.
Yeah,
hers is radial. Yeah.
I don't know. I've never done it. I think a radial extractor would make a whole lot more sense than a tangent extractor.
It does make more sense, but they're a lot more expensive.
Yeah, I know that.
That's all it is. And if anybody ever gets really big and they have a bunch, I just bought a 60 deep frame or 120 frame extractor. Yeah. That thing will spin a car. No, you'd have to come to where that thing's at. That thing's probably 800 pounds.
Like people at Case Western Reserve, they have a farm.
That thing is silly.
Yeah.
They have a farm out in, they have all those.
It's the size of a Chevy.
Where they have a polo field at. They have a huge.
I've been there.
To be honest, I haven't looked. There are some grants, but I mean, it's hard to find grants. Unless you're back.
I think it's in Gates Mills area.
Yeah, pretty neighborhood.
91.
Fairmount sounds fine.
I show people how to extract too if they come over.
Absolutely.
They got somebody they want to extract it. We charge you that. And a little prepaid, hand-cranked food extractor. People can borrow that anytime they want.
Okay.
No charge.
So a lot of that equipment is readily available if anybody needs it. More towards, because we're not quite in the season yet, but if anybody needs oxalic acid that's in the club, which is one of the ways, it's not quite a hard chemical, it's not quite a light chemical. It's the acid that you find in rhubarb and spinach. That's what we treat most of the time to get the mite counts down. If anybody needs any of it, just let me know. I have a ton of it. I have a 55-pound bag. When you're using, 7 grams at a crack for 4 boxes, it's pretty much, an unlimited supply. So I would much rather give it away to people who are going to use it than eventually, as it goes bad from age, have to buy more. This doesn't make sense. Oxalic acid, yeah. Oxalic. Yeah. But, if anybody needs any to treat their bees, let me know. A lot of times for people who have apiaries that are around my bees, I'll give them oxalic acid drizzle kits. Just because if you don't have mites, neither do I. Enlightened self-interest. So things to keep in mind.
Does if you're pollinating certain plants, does it help keep the count down?
Yeah, so the question was, do certain plants help with the mite count? And they've done studies on that, and they found that it actually does, but it's marginal. So it's not super helpful. And most of the plants that you would want to pollinate turn out, it's mostly the pollen that they're grabbing and the propolis. They're grabbing the resins to make propolises. So plants like hops, that's why you can buy hop guard. Keeps mites away. It's just hops. They use spent hops from a brewery, and somebody got the bright idea to drizzle that all around a hive, and the mites don't like it. If you've got thyme, thyme, whatever you want to call it, that
Thymol.
plant, that contains thymol, and that will, at relatively stout doses, affect the breeding cycle of the mite and allow the mites to fall back and the bees to get a head start and breed faster than the mites. You would have to plant a bloody field of it. It's not an ideal solution. You're better off a lot of times using thymol crystals or red thyme oil mixed into sugar feed. But, you can plant. It's just that it's not as effective as one would hope for. You would mix it into the sugar feed. So it's fed to them.
We have a suggestion from Facebook.
All right.
Installing different, where'd it go? Different foundation types. I believe that's what it said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Installing different foundations. We're going to actually have Val at some point do a class on how to wire up the old plastic foundation. She's offered to do that for us.
I have the old wax foundation.
Right.
Wax, but.
Yeah. Because anything with plastic, I'll be honest, I have no idea. I've used the J hangers and pre-wired foundation before. I found it to be an incredible pain in the butt, and it wasn't worth the effort. For a larger operation like us, the wax is the only thing that or the plastic is the only thing that makes sense, because when you spin it really fast, it doesn't blow out of the extractor, and the wax has a tendency to fail. So if you've got a large number of supers and all of a sudden they start randomly throwing out the wax, it gets old real quick.
Does the oxalic acid also go into the feeder?
No, the oxalic acid is drizzled on the bees, which is one way to do it, or it can be vaporized and the
Can
ball
you
will go through
spritz
the
it
hive.
versus drizzling it, like spritz it with the spritz bottle?
Now you're better off drizzling.
Yeah.
Spritzing it, you're not necessarily going to have the
volume.
Not so much the volume, but you don't know the dosage as well. So the way it was originally set up is it's 4 to 5 milliliters per seam. But we'll do a class on that. It's not we'll cover that because that was the disease treating, like she'd mentioned. And then we can go over. Just had another suggestion from Doug about the upside and downside of ankle biter bees. So you have several different breeds of bees, and we can get into details more about specifics of those breeds. I cover it a little bit when I do, a basic beekeeping class, but there are minutia of differences that make one breed better than another in certain areas. Personally, I hate the ankle biter bees. They're exceptionally mean, and I'll control the bloody varroa if I have to deal with that much pain. Not a fan.
Yeah. You can chat on YouTube. It'll make it easier because then I'll be able to see it.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, Doug, use YouTube. No. Was that breaking the fourth wall? Yeah. So that's pretty much all I've got with those questions. Don't really have a speaker for the night. I will say, we got one more.
Yeah, we were talking about, because in that beginning beekeeper class, we had a form with the different types of bees and stuff on it. And were you gonna post that?
I can if you want. It's a pretty commonly available chart.
Or at least a link where to find it or
Sure.
something.
Sure, it's no problem.
Pretty good description on the types of bees and which ones swap and which ones don't.
Sure, I can definitely put that, because there's a couple of different sources that you can find that information. We tend to use a line so you have different races of bees, okay? And you'll have Italians, you'll have Carniolans, you'll have Caucasians, you'll have Russians, German black bees. They just rediscovered the Irish bee. They thought it was extinct. That's kind of exciting. I'm a nerd. What do you want?
Is it drunk?
But it's fun that they found native bees on Ireland that they thought were gone. So that's actually kind of cool. But then you have lines of bees. So you have like Buckfast. So Brother Adam and Buckfast Abbey bred those bees. And they're not a true race. They're an amalgam of many races to get traits that were desirable. Okay? So you have a lot of sub-races. You have a lot of, and I guess I shouldn't say sub-races, you have a lot of lines. Those sub-lines have their own unique characteristics. So there's a lot to talk about as far as that subject. My partner and myself, we tend to favor Carniolans that are hybridized. And what they actually are is there's a gentleman in Canada called Caspian Apiaries, and we get breeder queens from him and have them bred, and they're crossbred to Caspians. But those are very gentle. The original bloodline that he's getting is from the Iranian-Syrian border. So you don't think about that as being a good place to overwinter bees in like Ohio. But the thing is it gets really cold in that area on their winter. It's really wet for part of the year, and it's really hot for the other part of the year. So for us, moving between Florida and Ohio, those things rock, because just when it starts to get a little bit cold down here and we move them south to Florida, they get to Florida and they go, this isn't winter. And they never stop the brood cycle. They kick right back in and build up immediately. If we decide to leave them in Ohio, they treat it just like they would a winter there, and they absolutely shut down. The ball shrinks, and it's alarming because they get small like the Russians, where the ball size is quite little, and you go, are they going to make it? And then in the spring, they expand quickly. So the different races have different traits like that. Russians, a lot of times, you'll think that you lost all your bees because you'll open it up and there's like, 2 coffee cups worth of bees in the spring. And the next thing you know, the hive's full of bees. They expand that greatly.
Are the Russians somewhat resistant to varroa?
The Russians are more resistant to varroa, but that's provided that you can get somebody who actually still has the pure bloodline. So unfortunately, pure Russians, there's a Russian Breeders Association, and they are not cheap. But those are a little bit more resistant to the mites. At that point, it starts getting like pedigreed dogs, where it just gets silly for the sake of being silly, price-wise.
What's a silly price?
I saw a package of those not too long ago for $375 because they were from the Breeders Association. I thought that was a pretty silly price.
What's the regular package?
Regular package, like $135, $115, depending on where you're going. So, I'm not paying, $375 for the Russians. They're not that much better. At least you would have trouble convincing me anyway. That's really it for the meeting part of it. But if anybody has any more questions, I'm more than willing to talk.
I was looking at different, my eyes are going, I can't read no more.
Sure.
I was thinking about buying a set of glasses.
Sure.
Binocular glasses.
Sure.
Or looking at different stuff off the sheets. Any recommendations on that?
For looking at the, like a better vision?
Yeah.
Believe it or not, you ever heard of a Frenzel lens? Frenzel lens, yeah, big dork, I know. So they sell sheets for like binders that are, imagine a big magnifying glass, okay? If you buy one of those big magnifying glasses, they're like this big, they're like the size of a piece of paper, they'll snap into the binder, okay? If you take the bees and you set them on a frame rest and then just hold that in front of it, it magnifies the entirety of the frame that way. So you don't have to search, it's a little more.
Or you could take photos, take your camera, your phone, take photos of each frame and do it in a certain order so you know which frame you took the photo of.
Right.
Or even have it marked at the top of the frame and take those photos, and then when you step away, you can zoom in and look at different parts of that frame, or take them and put them on your computer and blow it up.
So one of the things I've done, because a lot of times if I'm going through hives, I have way too many hives to go through in a short period of time. So if I'm honest, I don't look nearly as thoroughly as I should. I'm looking for obvious things wrong, okay? But what I'll do is I'll wear a GoPro. GoPros, you can get them that are up to 4K. That is a very crisp, very clear image. Now I can go back on my computer and I can actually zoom in on the frame that I held right in front of my chest where the GoPro sits. And I've got a very clean, crisp image of that frame. And I can go back through and look at every single frame that way from the GoPro. So if you're truly lazy, the GoPro is a great option because it doesn't matter if your eyes are bad, you know, the mic's that big on the screen when I blow it up. Not gonna miss that one. So that's just a cheap trick.
There's
But,
some knockoff GoPros too that are like
oh yeah, they're
$69 or something.
to be fair, I think mine is a knockoff. I don't think it's an actual GoPro. Those things are like $400, and I'll totally break it in bee yard.
Does it knock off? Will it?
Oh yeah, they're still 4K.
I'll grow up.
Still 4K. You just zoom in.
All
the
the
screen.
accessories fit the knockoffs. They're
The action cam, I think, is what.
you can get them on eBay as low as like $40 now.
Yeah. I think I have 2 or 3 of them actually.
Right.
Maybe. Any other questions? Don't be shy. All right. Well, that's about it then. So I move that we end the meeting. Is there a second? Meeting adjourned.
Okay.